Welcome back, fellow Nerf herders, to our Star Wars Plus review of The Bad Batch, titled
I Have a Bad Batch Feeling About This.
And we bring you today a beginning of another potential two-parter, or even three-parter, depending how far this goes.
And leading up to the season finale, possibly the series finale.
So yeah, the episodes we have today are
Infested and Mantle.
So the first episode is just a one-shot. If anything, you could probably consider it more a filler than anything else. And this episode takes place completely on Mantle. That's the planet, right?
I think so, yeah.
The batch returns after completing one of their missions, where once again, Sid omits crucial information that probably would have helped them get out of there much easier than normal.
But it seems in this case, the joke is on Sid, because she's been overthrown, yeah.
Yeah, they come back and they find all these new people hanging out in the bar who are like armored and everything. But when they get to the office, they find a new person sitting in Sid's seat, Roland Durand. And he's actually the son of a head of a major mafia cartel. And he decides that I'm a new and upcoming mafia star, so I'm just going to take what I want. And what does he do? He elbows Sid out. Pretty much her facility is all his now. And he plans on completing his very first mission, which is to smuggle spice to the Pike cartel.
He's trying to get in good with them.
So the Batch, of course, are not happy about this because obviously they didn't get paid for the job they just did, which they barely made it out. I gotta say, I find it funny how they've been working for Sid for a while now and they still don't know to ask all the details when it comes to going on these missions. I know sometimes she purposely omits detail, for the sake of safety and, knowing less is better and everything, but at the same time, it's guys, you really should ask a little more. It's is there anything potentially deadly we should look out for, or anything we should know about that might harm us? They never think to do that. It seems to be a consistent problem with them. So yeah, they kind of chalk it up to a loss, and since Sid's not there anymore, they have no reason to stay on the planet, and they decide to leave. However, Omega stops them, citing that Sid needs their help. She's been helping them so far. And it turns out Sid feels the same way because she is on their ship when they get there. And she explains about how she had been overthrown and everything, but thankfully she has a plan to counteract that. And that involves stealing the spice shipment before the Pikes come to pick it up. Which looks bad on him and could potentially get him and his whole group basically killed, because the Pikes don't fuck around. No, they don't. But the way they have to do this is they have to sneak into Sid's office, and since they obviously can't go in the direct way, they have to go through the secret tunnel, which apparently leads past a giant cavern that is infested with these giant bug creatures. So they have to be real stealthy, otherwise these things will devour them whole. They eventually manage to do it, but as they're escaping with the spice, unfortunately, Roland and his group catch on to the fact and chase them through it. And in the midst of escaping, they drop the spice down the hole. On the one hand, they kind of completed their mission. On the other hand, that ends up not working out so well. Yeah, because the Pikes show up and obviously they're pissed off. But Roland immediately sells out Sid because he knows that she's behind it.
But Sid's having none of it.
Yeah, she tries to shift the blame, saying, oh, I don't know anything about a spice or whatever. But as we said, the Pikes don't fuck around. So they are willing to kill everybody if it means getting what they want. They even capture Omega, try to hold her for ransom. But thankfully, Sid is willing to compromise and actually go retrieve the spice.
So we should mention there's that one pet.
Ruby,
yeah. Who's apparently grown the affinity for Roland. So I think that's the first thing that they notice when they come into Sid's office and he's the one there. Yeah,
Ruby ends up coming up sort of a plot point in this.
Two of Sid's regulars are in on the plan to an extent. They're trying to lure Ruby out of the bar to get Roland out of there while they steal the spice.
Those pellet
treats,
yeah. Ooh, piece of candy. Yeah. Ooh, piece of candy. Ooh, piece of candy.
The thing that they've been racking their bar tab up.
Yeah.
But yeah, so they've got that, and obviously Roland is pretty enamored with Ruby.
Yeah, he actually like sends his minions out to go find her once he realizes she's missing. They drop the indication that Roland isn't completely a bad guy, because what's the thing they said that someone isn't really a bad person if animals like them?
Something like that.
Because animals, like they say, can really tell like who's a good and who's a bad person, especially if they're like warming up to said person. And I know that's like a big trope in a lot of like movies where you show like a villain like either stroking a cat or having like a pet, and it's supposed to be an indication that they're not all that bad. I kind of argue against that sometimes, because just because you have a pet doesn't mean you're not a bad person.
No.
I mean, heck, I just think back to Rescuers Down Under, because McLeach had like a pet iguana, but at the same time he's like a poacher. He willingly hunts and kills animals, so it's like
Or it's like the early days of Pokemon Island, the giant Pokemon. They reveal that there are no bad Pokemon. Master might be bad, but Pokemon isn't necessarily.
I mean, I argue that they're not bad to the point where they would hurt animals, because you know that they're truly a bad person if they actually, like, willingly hurt and kill animals with no remorse. Yeah, this is enough indication where Omega softens a bit on Roland, despite the fact that he's overthrown Sid and is putting, the troop through this. At least it seems like maybe he might be reasoned with. Thankfully, once the group manages to recover the spice, the Pikes do let them go. In terms of Roland, like, it looks like they're gonna kill him, and Omega even pleads on his behalf, and thankfully all they do is just chop off a horn. I imagine that's like the equivalent of like circumcision or something for his species, or at least it's something that's like a symbol of a great dishonor. I think Roland's gonna come back as an ally, and like an essential ally at that, because I mean he's related to like a big mafia cartel boss. And as we've seen, he knew what he was beaten. Once the Pikes did that and walked off, and he realized that this isn't, like, worth it, he just, like, let Sid have her bar back and left. Probably, like, we'll consider the fact that Omega tried to plead for him, and he probably will come back at a certain point when is, like, the most dire or something.
Yeah. I mean, I'm feeling, given the direction that we've just gone into in the next episode, yeah, they're going to need all the help they can get.
I will say, I'm surprised, because in 2 instances, I actually thought Sid was going to die in that episode.
I did too, especially like toward the end where they're trying to get out of
the cavern.
I was afraid that like the thing would snap and she'd fall in or she'd lose balance or something like that. But yeah, no, I'm definitely with you. I thought like they were going to kill her off.
Because at first I thought she was killed off initially when that guy showed up. Because I'm like, if he's part of the mafia, he probably like, and just took over.
But no, he just muscled her out.
Yeah. And then, like you said, when they were in the cavern, I'm surprised she actually went in with Gregor to like recover that. But I know it's part of like showing that she herself isn't a bad person either. Because, I mean, we've already seen instances of that, but, like, she seemed real hell-bent on getting the spice back herself, especially once they took Omega. It's like, you mess with my tiny girl and you're gonna get it. So I appreciate her doing that. Because, I mean, again, it shows, she's not helpless. No. Far from it.
I never thought she was helpless.
I know, but how usually
it's like... more, I think, like, she's more in stuff for herself versus for others.
Yeah.
So in this case, it's good to see that she's willing to get her hands dirty for something she really cares about.
Like, I never really realized, but now it's obvious, like, that she pretty much calls, like, the entire batch by nicknames as opposed to their actual names.
In a way, that's kind of a good way to go about it. It gets her to be, somewhat detached.
Yeah. Because I feel like when it gets to a point where she actually does call them by their names, like, something bad's gonna happen. So yeah, thankfully things go back to normal at the end of the episode. One thing to note is that Hunter actually questions why Omega stood up for Roland despite all he's done, and we already knew she was different from the other clones. But here, she has, like, a real enhanced sense of empathy. Because, like, even Boba didn't really show any empathy when you think about it. But in this case, Omega, like, she truly wants to do good. She truly wants to help people. And it's obvious she didn't really learn that from the Batch too much. Because I know the Batch, their purpose as soldiers is to mostly help people. But it's also to follow orders. And there are times you see they really do not want to be in certain situations they find themselves in. But she, as soon as she hears someone's in trouble, she goes for it.
Like I was saying with you earlier, it's because of them being, trained as soldiers, a lot of that empathy is just kind of wiped away. Granted, you see a lot of the clones start to gain a bit of it as we go along, but I think, it's like they're soldiers, they're trained not to have empathy, otherwise how can they perform the job? versus Omega, who's been in the lab the whole time and been with a Kaminoan who clearly has some form of emotion, empathy to her.
Yeah, I believe, because he was part of, the healing unit, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, as being trained as a doctor, you're supposed to be empathetic with your patients. Mm-hmm. That does make sense, and I guess this is, showing that she's having more of an effect on them than they realize. Because, again, most of what we've seen them do so far, we've seen them, obviously, show displays of them trying to be good people of their own volition, but for the most part, they do it because they're on a mission, first and foremost. But it's nice to see them try to be a little more flexible in that sense, doing what's right for the sake of it being right. And that ends up being what leads us into the next episode, which may end up being a good or bad thing, depending on how this turns out. The next episode, War Mantle, starts off with them, once again going on a mission. However, they get a signal from Rex, who says that one of his commanders had been captured on this outer rim planet. They managed to detect the distress signal. They go to the planet, which is supposed to be totally uninhabited. But when they get there, they find this underground facility, an Imperial-run facility. There are clone troopers everywhere. There's all these ships and stuff.
Well, there are troopers everywhere.
Yeah, this is the first instance where we see, a majority of the clone troopers are now being replaced by the recruits, actual regular people. And it's obvious that they're not only changing that, but, the protocols as to how to sign in through the doors and everything. And just, a few little tidbits here and there, but that is slowly becoming more of what we know from the original trilogy. Even their outfits are slightly different.
Starting to resemble more what we saw in the original trilogy.
I thought it was a nice touch, because I read up that their new armor was actually, the basic artwork for the original Stormtroopers. And they look a lot like it, just a little more bulkier in places.
And more streamlined, I'd say, too.
So I thought that was a nice hint, because, this is technically the beginning of the Empire, so thus they would show the original concept art for these guys. So kudos to them on that.
That's what I love about this series, too, is just showing that transition. I feel like that's something we never really got from a lot of the previous media. One minute we have clone troopers, and then you go into the next movie and they're already stormtroopers. And even you get to Rebels, and it's already at that point, too.
Yeah, this is a nice way to, fill in the blanks for a lot of things. Yep. It's, stuff that you don't really think about, but when you do think about it, it's yeah, how did that happen?
Because I remember between episodes 2 and 3, there was, a bit of minor change in the costumes to the clone troopers. You start to see them a little more resembling what the stormtroopers look like in episode 3, but they're not there yet. And then I think with Clone Wars, I think they were kind of going that route too. But yeah, again, nothing really fully resembling what the stormtroopers would become.
Oh yeah, and speaking of filling in the blanks, turns out that the clone trooper that they were tasked with saving is actually a familiar character.
Gregor.
Yeah, Gregor. We've finally watched enough Clone Wars up to this point. We know who that character is. It was an episode during this multi-part arc where it was R2, a bunch of other astromechs, and that tiny
general
colonel.
Who was originally a map reader.
Yeah, and during their mission, they end up getting stranded on this planet called the Void, which looks like it's just an endless desert planet, but it ends up being a secret separatist colony or something. And that's where they find a clone trooper who apparently landed there but got amnesia. They managed to jar his memory, and he actually protects them as they make their escape off the planet, but it's implied that he died because he was the only trooper against an army of droids. But obviously he made it out. We didn't actually see him get shot or see a body, so even though he said he'd find his way off, I'm I don't know, this is a pretty dire situation, but obviously he found a way.
And while I've seen Rebels, I didn't know who he was at the time, so I couldn't really remember that this character existed.
Yeah, apparently he showed up in the episode where Rex finally shows up. From what I read up is that Gregor's mind was a bit touched. Because I guess between being broken of his amnesia, getting caught up in the explosion and everything in between his escape, he probably went a little crazy. And you can kind of, like, hear it in his voice a bit. At first I thought it was, like, D. Bradley Baker trying to distinguish his voice from the rest of the batch. The way his voice, like, kind of cracked and, like, changed volumes and stuff, it sounded like the guy was a bit unhinged. So I'm guessing this is either, like, the beginning or the process of him working through his mental issues. Yeah. Technically, when you think about it, this is the first time he shows up. This is before Rebels.
Yep.
I'm just wondering, like, how the hell did he get all the way out here?
Apparently, yeah. So now he's training the new recruits.
Yeah, this is where we finally see the big turning point where the Empire is, like, fully removing themselves from the whole clone trooper program. Because we already have been seeing hints of it up to this point. We saw that they are definitely more intent on having regular human recruits as opposed to clones. Because we saw that Crosshairs was training that one group. But now is where they are fully in the process of detaching themselves. Because there are scenes that take place on Kamino where...
Lama Su, I think it is.
Yeah, yeah. She's like talking to the head guy about how the Empire has cut all their contracts, and the way that the officers are implying is that once they got what they needed from the Kaminoans, they're pretty much going to kill them all. Which, let's face it, we knew that's where it was heading anyway.
The Kaminoans see the writing on the wall at long last.
Yeah. I'm like, how long did it take you guys to realize that? Because it seemed like they were more in denial, if anything, because they're trying so hard to push that,
to stay relevant, to stay in business.
Yeah, to show that, the clones are still relevant, we still can play a part, but even he admitted, it's like, we played a part in our own demise. And I'm like, yeah, you kind of did.
Yep.
And I felt bad, too, because, like, at one point you see them leading, like, a group of, like, young troopers. And I'm like, what's going to happen to these kids? Because, like, are they still going to keep them and just train them as extra soldiers? Or are they going to, like, kill them all? Because, like, I know they still use clone troopers to a degree. Yeah. But not in the same degree as, like, other regular people in the future. So I do wonder what the hell's going to happen with that. And, of course, like, in anticipation, they try to make... their preparations for leaving before the Empire decides to finally dispatch them.
Unfortunately, they get found out.
I just love how the guy, like, he tries to throw the other one under the bus. Who's like, oh, you found her trying to sneak all these medicines and vials away. Oh, how could you? But it's obvious they see through his bullshit because they're like, well, she's at least useful. She knows how to work all this stuff, so we don't need a politician. Yeah, we don't need your ass. So we don't see it, but it's heavily implied that they killed him. And frankly, good riddance, because the guy was a dumbass. Because I'm like, I get it, he was trying his best, but like, and especially the fact that he was willing to kill Omega once they got what they needed from her, it's like, no, you're obviously too stupid to lead. You can go the way of the fat guy for all I care. But of course that leaves the one Kaminoan in a bad position, though. Because how the heck is she supposed to monitor Omega and the Bad Batch if she's under... surveillance. Yeah, under surveillance of the Empire. Yeah. And I feel like she's going to let that slip at some point. And then they get an even bigger target on their back.
Though, I mean, she does have Fennec.
Yeah, she could call on Fennec to, like...
help her out a bit.
Yeah, either to, like, get them somewhere safe or something. But I guess we'll have to wait and see on that. Yeah. But yeah, back to the secret base. So they managed to somehow make their way out. Well, sort of out. They're, like, on the edge of, like, the base, which is, like, overlooking a cliffside. Omega and Wrecker, who had been left behind as, like, backup, like, fly the ship to meet them. But because the troopers find out that they are trying to leave through the shaft and thus are probably, like, trying to get away on a ship, they unleash all these other ships to go intercept them, and their ship almost gets blown up a few times. And because of that, they had to make multiple trips back for, like, each trooper. Unfortunately, Hunter doesn't quite make it. Yeah, he falls off the ship and into the woods, and he realizes at this point that they're taking too much fire to be able to come back and rescue him safely without killing themselves in the process. So they have no choice but to escape the planet and leave Hunter behind. So Hunter is now a prisoner on that planet, and who should show up to see him but good old Crosshairs. Well, he wished he could have gotten the whole batch. He says, be enough. Yeah. Oy, oy, oy. Yeah, because I've been wondering about that, because we knew that he was now actually, like, hunting them, but it seems like the planet kind of served it up to him on a platter. But I'm wondering what's going to happen as a result of their interaction. I think to a degree he might try to convert Hunter, possibly. I see him doing one of two things. Either try to convert him at first into, being a loyal soldier, or probably torture him, for the location of everyone else. I'm kind of leaning more toward the torture, just because we've seen how much of an asshole Crosshairs is at this point, and he probably has written them all off as being, unsavable or unconvertible, so he just wants to use them for whatever purpose. I hope, he finds a way to sort of reach Crosshairs, just so we can see an inkling that he might still possibly turn around and help, but I don't think that's going to happen. So that's what we have to look forward to now in terms of the next episodes. You said the titles weren't dropped,
They
right?
have not been dropped, but yeah, these should be the last 2 of the season, possibly the series. But yeah, again, the titles have not been dropped yet.
I kind of hope this isn't just a one-off series, because there's still a lot they can do. There's still a lot of fill-in-the-blanks they can do between this point and Rebels, in my opinion. So I really hope this isn't just a singular season, or at least, I hope that it got enough views that Disney will consider renewing it. Because I don't know how they're gonna end it. They might as well, do, a crazy cliffhanger, either because they're confident that they'll continue, or just to create the hype and interest so they can get a second season.
Or they have another midquel spin-off series that ties in with that batch.
Yeah, there's a lot of potential in what's going to happen from this point, but we know that the mission is going to be rescuing Hunter, trying to get him away from Crosshairs, and hopefully doing it without losing anybody else in the process. But yeah, until next time, I'm Kat MacBerrie.
I'm Doug MacBerrie.
And please, for the love of God, don't leave off on a Loki cliffhanger. I don't think we can take that again.
No.